Yeah.
Start. Okay, we're good. We're starting. It's recording. Hey,
Yippee.
Cal. What's up?
Sky. What's up on your end?
Um, Fluorescent lights. It's not bad.
Amazing.
How's coronavirus treating you?
Keeping me real good. Keeping me locked down and ready to be online.
Amazing. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'm losing my mind, but what are you gonna do?
I
Uh,
was only losing my mind when I was in quarantine without Wi-Fi.
oh
That was
that.
awful.
Oh, oof.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was
Yikes.
abroad and when I came home again, then I had to stay somewhere else for 14 days.
Ugh. That sounds
It was
awful.
awful. Yeah, like I unironically ended up watching Cartoon Networks.
Okay, look.
Yeah,
First of
yeah,
all,
like look,
did you catch
like
Rick and
the
Morty?
thing is that oh no, no, I don't think any channel had it.
Oh,
Our channels aren't the best always, and like it's like either I can choose between Cartoon Network and Disney Channel, or I can like watch History Channel for pawn shops, and that's awful. Or I can watch other reality shows. That's awful. I mean,
so
like I think like the only tolerable programs outside of like Cartoon Network, it's like a couple of channels will show either an episode of Futurama or Simpsons or Whose Line Is It Anyway?
look, dude.
And other than that, it's like trash, just trash. Like I did not realize how trash TV was for like our generation. It's like either I have to pick between like Cartoon Network with Gumball and Phineas and Ferb, or I have to watch like trash channels with Kim Kardashian and other horrible reality shows.
Actually, my speaking of trash TV, my mom and grandma are upstairs right now watching like this shitty telenovela on TV right now, and I can hear it in the background. It's so goddamn distracting. It's so annoying. Uh,
At,
see,
at least you'll catch up with the plot.
oh yeah, who died this time? See, we're great millennials, and we know good quality content and shit. Fucking
Cartoon
speak.
Network.
Funny story. I thought that I thought we were gonna talk tomorrow because I said Saturday,
Oh,
and then I realized, oh yeah, it's Saturday in Cal's time, and I'm like, oh, I'm a fucking idiot. But
yeah.
so I've done no preparation, so it's gonna be completely,
Uh,
ooh, fine off the top, off the
that's
dome.
fine. I always do better when I don't prepare, anyways.
I feel that way too. Yeah, I always make more mistakes when I'm reading from a script than when I'm just talking free form.
But no matter how much I prepare or don't prepare, I always come out afterwards thinking, wow, that went horrible.
True, true.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess that's a good segue to just dive right into it. Uh, so
Yeah.
we were going to talk about social democracy versus socialism. Because, all right, here's my thought process when I was thinking of this. So before I even like try to get anyone onto Chad anarchist shit, we should like just start at the basics of just regular socialism. So uh, when I talk about socialism, I mean public democratic ownership of the means of production. That's it. Um, and I think, as people who value democracy, I mean, I hope we both value democracy. I'm pretty sure we do.
Okay.
This is a pretty, laudable goal uh, for the place that we spend most of our time at, which is work, to be a sort of a democratic, to have a democratic approach to that instead of what it is now, which is basically just a tiny dictatorship. Um, and you have anything to say about social democracy? Why you think it's the based system and not cringe?
Um, if like I'm actually you fell out for half a second there and I didn't
Oh,
quite hear like did you say like socialism is a base system or social democracy is a
oh
base
yeah,
system?
yes. I was saying like, do you want to say something about social democracy and why you feel it's like the
Oh.
best system?
Oh, yeah. I think it's more appealing. I
Hmm.
think that generally speaking, people really enjoy the concept of being able to move up the ladder through their own ingenuity, and that obtaining personal wealth in their own little kingdoms is fine as long as it doesn't cross a certain border.
Hmm. Well, what do you feel the crossing the border should be like? Like for example, hurt, psychologically damaging employees or something like that, or
I think, like, first of all, any job, decent living,
mhm.
um, and all jobs should try to make sure that their employees actually sorry, I lost my train of thought. That's a good start, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, like every employee should actually job. They shouldn't be constantly under fear of being fired. They shouldn't have to pick between their mental health or working. In times of crisis, like during Corona, people shouldn't fear about not being able to pay their rent because their job has to let them go.
Yeah, I totally agree. You'll find no disagreement there. Um,
Yeah,
I guess what we disagree on is how we achieve um, such a nice little package there. Because uh, how I feel is that I don't think social democracy. If, some people might not take this serious, like not take it seriously, but think this is weird. But I don't think social democracy is very maybe stable or has a long shelf life. Let me say, the way I see it, when you have an ever shrinking class of people that can accumulate capital, like as is the case in capitalism, so those social programs that we all love and enjoy will inevitably be pushed back and fought against with everything short of revolution, like been happening here, and like what's happening with like the NHS in the UK.
yeah. I I definitely do agree that when you let someone accumulate wealth indefinitely, they obtain power and they want to hold that power. And obviously, they don't want to let it spread out, so they'll just accumulate more and more and more unless the state steps in and sort of says stop.
Yeah.
In the US, that's clearly to some extent failed, in part because you had a lot of deregulation in the 70s and 80s in particular with Reagan. And that obviously messed up the system more. But I don't think that that's because the system is unstable. I think that that's because obviously when you deregulate the system, then it will inevitably lead to an unjust and insane accumulation of wealth. That's why it's important for people and the system to be able to prevent said accumulation before it becomes too massive.
Right, I agree, and that's why I feel socialism is the best way to do that because you can't accumulate because you can't won't be able to accumulate that wealth at all. Um,
Yeah, but I don't think that accumulating wealth in of itself is bad. I think that when you accumulate too much wealth and when you then don't participate in society, that becomes a problem. Or when the system is laid out so that when you do accumulate wealth, you can just bribe your politicians.
right. Um, yeah, yeah. I'm not saying accumulating wealth is bad. I mean,
Sure,
it's
you just
some.
want to sort of,
You can go into the whole, property is theft,
yeah,
anarchist thing, but
cut out
accu-
the whole process so that it doesn't happen at all, right?
yeah, I want a process by which it doesn't have to happen, by which the power is spread out to all the workers, and so that power can't accumulate in the hands of a few, because it's always spread out in the hands of the many.
Well, yeah, to some extent, sure. That's important for society to prevent. And that's sort of why the US has failed. Um, but but I don't think that it inherently means that you have to go to socialism and prevent everyone from accumulating wealth. You can find instances where it's positive, such as in my country, in Norway. Clearly, it has had more success here, and people are rather pleased overall with the system compared to the US, at least. And I think it's
You
kind of
guys actually have
interesting.
healthcare.
Yeah, that too. And generally, we're just way more left-leaning. Even our more right-wing parties would be moderate or leftist in the US.
Oh my god, it's crazy here.
It kind of is like no one here is talking about disbanding Medicare, although they're like the far right in this country is for partially privatizing certain medical cares with, for instance, elders, right?
Mhm.
Like they want private firms to take care of elders and then the state will subsidize it, which is questionable. Um,
I don't.
yeah,
I'm gonna press X to doubt on that one, Chief.
sure. That's fair. Um, but the thing here is that you don't really see a lot of people touting for socialism here.
Mhm.
Like the Communist Party in Norway last year had 300 votes. No, not last year, but last election cycle.
So it's about
Uh,
like the Communist
and I
Party in
think,
most places.
yeah, sure. But I think that as a whole, you'll probably see more people touting for something akin to socialism in the US than here,
Mhm.
because in your system, that system failed. And whenever a system fails and people want radical change, um, you can sort of see the opposite in a lot of previously communist countries, which is that, like, I know a couple of people from Latvia and Bulgaria, and those were under Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And what they'll often say is like, "Oh, the Soviet Union was so horrible. It was so trash. Oh, thank God we don't have that system anymore.
Yeah. Well.
The system is kind of trash too.
Well.
At least like Bulgaria in particular
Yeah. Yeah.
has a lot of inequality and poverty after the Soviet Union collapsed.
Yeah.
But people
Romania
still
too.
absolutely, like in my opinion, people there in particular really despise the communist system. At least the people I've talked to.
Well.
My girlfriend is from Bulgaria, so I've been there too.
Oh, that's nice. Well,
Yeah.
well, I mean, there's a lot we can. I'm not even gonna go into the whole USSR wasn't socialist thing. But
Yeah. That's definitely. Well, I think that's half true. It was more state capitalist, sure.
yeah, yeah. But the more
But
um, I've actually seen studies from former Soviet satellite states that like somewhere around 30 to 50% of people miss being who lived around those times preferred it under uh, this weird state capitalist thing that they had going on. Um, but to for the wider point, yeah, I agree that in a blatantly failed system, because many American systems have blatantly failed the people. You're gonna get this radical reformist desires, as opposed to a country like Norway where everything's kind of alright. Um, but yeah, I mean, I've never been
no,
to
that's
Norway.
fine.
It's I'm sure it's very
Mm,
beautiful, but
it's all right.
yeah, yeah. Uh, but the way I see it, whether uh, whether it succeeds or let me think about it. Put this: the failure of the U.S. is of the New Deal policies is an overly blatant system, and it's not just the right wing party of this country. It's been
Sure.
Democrats as well.
It's, I mean, it's
They're
just corporatism. You're
yeah,
corporatists.
it's corporate it's corporate hegemony. Again, it's corporate hegemony. But I think
Sure.
in the U.S. is a special case because um, wasn't it that the U.S. was the only country after the Second World War that their economy actually increased as opposed to all the other huge
Yeah, yeah,
countries.
and you were ironically a lot more left then too.
Oh yeah,
Like,
dude, the
yeah,
IWW had like millions of members at that time. It was
and
crazy.
I know, like in the 30s and 40s, you actually had a decent amount of communists that
Oh
were
yeah,
voting.
fucking Pete Buttigieg's dad was a Marxist.
That's yeah, that's nice.
They're just crazy
A
to
little
think
bit.
about now. Um,
Yeah,
I think that the U.S. it was kind of set up to fail because as opposed to Norway, you well not set up to fail, but when it fails way worse than a country like Norway can because
well,
just because our market is so much higher and there's so much more to lose, and so you're gonna have a lot more of this just
I
rampant
mean,
accumulation of capital.
yeah, but also like part of why when you fail so hard is because of all the deregulation, because
Oh
you
yeah,
went so far right and you don't have any real system to take care of people properly.
yeah, exactly. And
Uh,
I think
yeah,
and part and part of the reason was part of the reason is also because of the weakening of unions. Like unions used to be like really powerful
sure.
forces, and now they're being completely defanged, um, which is why I'm
Yeah.
a syndicalist. Uh, but
I mean, I'd also point out that part of the failure of the American system is that you're not truly democratic. You have, first of all, legal bribery, and then you
yeah, it
have
wasn't set up.
gerrymandering.
Yeah, it wasn't set up to be
Yeah,
democratic at all. But
I
uh,
mean, it has some aspects of democracy, but then you sort of allow bribery, and it's
I think the only
questionable.
other country that does that is Romania. Like we're
No,
literally
I think, yeah, no, like I'm uncertain, but I think there are a lot of other countries that have,
this
like,
like
what the
weird,
fuck?
weird lobbying, legal bribery shit. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. There's a
yeah,
lot of stuff that.
lobbying.
Well, that's another thing is if these companies were worker-owned cooperatives, the point if we just lived in let's just say a regular Marxist socialist system of the United States, if all these companies were worker-owned cooperatives, they then this lobbying would be there would still be lobbying, there would still be this kind of behavior, but it'd be geared towards helping people instead of geared towards helping just a specific group of uh, the small class interests.
Well, I'm not sure I agree. I think that there would still be special interests. There would still be people that would
Oh, those.
benefit specifically small groups.
Oh yeah, yeah. No,
Like
those.
help, like I mean, when a billionaire lobbies, they're
Mhm.
helping people. They're just helping the 0.1%.
Yeah, yeah.
And
What
you
I'm
might,
saying is, in this case, like if there was a worker cooperative of, I don't know, an energy production company that makes a lot of their money on oil, they'd they would feel the people would feel the brunt of climate change would be something like workers would be the workers who work that company, and so that company would be much more reticent to lobby for or much more inclined to lobby for things like green energy to transition even faster away from fossil fuels, as opposed to now where special oil interests, uh, the the CEOs that own these oil companies, they don't give a shit. They're not going to be affected that much by climate change. It's us that are going to be fucked. So why would
the
they
thing
care
is,
about?
there's a lot of people within the oil companies or general people that don't have those fears, though, and that's partly due to ignorance, yeah, uh, but also due to their own personal gain on it. Like they don't have to be very wealthy to feel like they're getting a good deal out of being in the oil business.
Yeah, yeah, but
Like,
that's also part of. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't believe in climate change, and that's because of manufactured consent. Um, because our media is also run by corporations. Uh,
but
like,
I mean, there's people here too that don't believe in climate change, although that's way. less prominent, and
Uh,
you don't find any news companies here that promote the idea of climate change isn't real.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, because you don't have a station. I don't think you have a station like Fox News or something owned by what's that guy? Rupert Murdoch. Yeah.
I mean, news here is just fundamentally different, I'd say. Like, I know that people, like, there are a lot of people that do think the news are biased, but they aren't anywhere near as bad as in the US.
Oh yeah, corporate media is insane. But you see this in Australia as well. Pretty much everywhere that has this like Rupert Murdoch owned business has this argument on climate change, where everywhere else it really doesn't happen. And sure, there are always going to be those very few like fringe groups. I mean, hell, there are still people who believe the moon
Sure.
landing was faked or whatever. Like you're always going to have
Yeah,
those people, but the influence of those people, the influence of that in the case of climate change, would be much more, would be much smaller in the worker cooperative system that I'm proposing.
sure. I agree that at least the media wouldn't put as much a spin on it. At least not, at least the oil companies wouldn't lobby as much. Yeah, I can't really.
Well, it's also it's that, and also the incentives for them would be more geared towards helping the general population, because the people who own these companies would be, well, yeah, the people who own these companies would be more along the general population lines.
Sure.
Yeah. Um,
Now,
but
in Norway, like technically speaking, a lot of oil companies are privately owned,
yeah.
but the state does have a lot more power all over them. They have a lot of taxes, and
Wait,
technically
your
speaking,
country doesn't just let your companies destroy the
yeah,
environment. What
yeah, I
what's
know,
wrong with you?
shocking, isn't it? Yeah, I know. I mean, fracking is technically legal here, but it's never been done.
That's insane to me.
So that's kind of yeah, yeah. Like you can frack, it's just no one has ever done it. So, although most of our oil is in the sea anyway, so that
Yeah,
helps.
that's true. Hard to frack the sea.
But I mean, yeah, we have something called oljefondet, like the me no speak England. Um, like we have due to all the oil, which is
Yeah.
supposed to be specifically for the country, and that still happened under the social democratic system, right?
Hmm.
I don't know how, like you can actually publicly check how big it is. I'm gonna do that right now. Sorry for all the typing.
Oh, go ahead.
Um,
I'll just cut it out. I'll
let's
cut out
see.
all the parts that make me look bad. No.
That's true.
Um, we agree that, obviously manufacturer consent, that's bad. But part of the problem with manufacturer consent and part of the problem with these companies is transparency. And I believe that if we democratize these companies, if even if they do want to do shady stuff, it would be way harder for them to do it under a more democratic model of operation.
Probably would be harder, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Like the thing though, which I think I've brought up before, is that in smaller companies, for instance,
Mhm.
let's say someone starts a company, at how many like employees do they have to have before they suddenly stop being owned by that person and then going to the community, or does that happen immediately?
Um, well, there we would have to get more specifically into the policy of it, but I don't know. The I guess it would depend on the dynamics of a company, on like a big company versus a small business. I guess in France they do it by like if you have 50 employees, you have to give them, you're considered a big company or something, or if you have more than 50 employees. So let's just say for sake of argument, let's say you have 50 employees is the limit until you have to make your company into a co-op.
Okay. Um, wouldn't that also incentivize never having more than 15 employees and trying to either outsource or automate the process? I mean, I'm technically for automizing as much as possible,
Yeah.
but
Well,
still.
I think a little bit of a tangent from that is I think socialism is the best answer for automation because I mean
Uh,
the thing with automation that people don't ask isn't, oh, what are we gonna do once all these robots come take our jobs? The question we should be asking is why the hell do we have a system where making the economy more efficient is going to destroy it and wreck it completely?
sure, but I don't think that that would necessarily happen under social democracy either. You just have to reinforce certain aspects of it. I mean, during the Industrial Revolution, every process happened to change. We went from being an agrarian country to suddenly being mostly focused on factories and whatnot.
In
Um,
England, they were pretty much forced to.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you couldn't really work the fields
Well, it's
because
because
one, there was too little land, and
well, it's also because the government put
oh,
this law in that basically forced everyone into the cities.
well, I wouldn't know about that specific detail,
Yeah, that's
but
updated
maybe
stuff.
that's. I mean,
Mhm.
it worked, I guess.
I
Uh,
mean, I guess.
yeah, but I mean,
Mhm.
there were a lot of fears then too about how we would remodel society. How would we get enough jobs? Of course, that quickly changed. But from then on out, society actually society rapidly changed from being industrial to being service based.
Mhm.
Uh, because factories were just too efficient too,
Oh yeah.
and I, I don't think that when the next automation process comes along and wipes out most of the service jobs, we can't continue the chain. And even in a social democratic system, you would still be able to take care of people, and it will
Well,
still have. My throat is kind of hoarse sometimes. Sorry.
no, that's fine.
A system would still be able to take care of people, but at the same time, there would still be possible to incentivize individuals to either I wouldn't just say revolutionize, but progress within their sector, which would be beneficial anyway.
Would you say they need to pick up the tools and seize some means of uh, creating value? Yeah, I get what you mean. The thing is that if we are using the Industrial Revolution as a comparison, the Industrial Revolution, like, there was so much turmoil, at least
Oh
uh,
yeah,
in many parts of Europe
I
and in
mean,
America especially. Like, think
sure.
of how long it took for us um, to get these union. How many people and how many people died, and how many general strikes had to happen for us to get these union rights and to get the 8 hour workday? Like,
Sure. A lot of places that was the case, yeah. I mean, using children and everything was obviously too proficient, and companies did abuse said rights too
oh yeah,
much.
and
Uh, I mean,
in
I
Italy,
mean,
actually, in Italy,
yeah,
what they used to do, mine workers would take their kids down to the mines with them, and then the government made it illegal,
yeah,
but they
yeah,
still continued to do it because they didn't have enough, to make ends meet.
yeah. I mean, yeah, you can definitely say that the industrial to like free market capitalism.
You cut out a little there. What'd you say? Did the industrial? You cut out an industrial revolution.
What?
You cut out a
Oh,
little.
I said you could argue that during the Industrial Revolution, like that's the closest thing we've ever come to true free market capitalism because there was no real regulations on businesses or the market. You could literally sell people poison and it would be fine. And yeah, that needs to be avoided. Uh,
Yeah, you hear that,
yeah,
libertarians?
yeah. But I mean, that wasn't that was the case then, yeah. And we have progressed a lot since then. Just because there might be another revolution in quotation marks, during the next 50 years, that doesn't mean that we will regress to that either.
I
And
don't. Mm.
I think that as society goes along, we need to sort of have something akin to a UBI, yeah.
Um,
But that doesn't have to.
I get what you mean. I don't. Here's the thing, though. Like, I when I make this point of how bad things were after the Industrial Revolution, I'm not saying we're going to regress to that point. During this Industrial
Yeah,
Revolution, we didn't regress back to some
yeah,
feudal
I
working.
get that. It's more just that you think that your system would be better at preventing
Well,
all the negative aspects that will come during any revolution.
it's not that it will be preventing all the negative aspects. It's that it's a system by which those negative aspects won't be um, will be much softer as opposed to the current system, which I don't
Yeah,
believe has any capacity to like actually deal with this problem. I mean, it may
because the
have some,
American
but
system is kind of a failure in a social democratic sense too, though,
oh yeah.
uh, because it has failed at taking care of its citizens, and it has let a couple of people hoard up wealth too much. But in Norway, that's not necessarily the case to the same extent. Yeah, people do hoard up wealth here too, but it's still not taken to the amount that it's beyond ridiculous.
Well, wouldn't you
Like, I
say?
don't remember.
Mhm.
Oh, no, go on.
Oh well, wouldn't you say that taking it to the amount that's ridiculous would be the natural conclusion of continuously hoarding this wealth?
That's why, again, like, the state has to sort of prevent insane hoarding of wealth. Like, you have that availability because the state doesn't prevent that, because the state allows monopolies, because the state says that, oh, you can have billions upon trillions of dollars and still be taxed very little.
Mm. But wouldn't this also be a problem? Because here's the thing: when you talk about regulation is a very nebulous concept. Like you could, a lot of people, for example, people talk about deregulating banks in America, but banks are really just these big institutions that the United States allows to handle its money. Like deregulating a bank actually makes it like more. So deregulating a bank doesn't really make sense. It's just more like the people themselves in the bank aren't, you know, are allowed to do what they want. Uh,
Abuse it more, yeah.
yeah, allowed
Suddenly
to
raise.
get away with more stuff. It's basically just like what helps a few specific people more is what deregulation means. But when you talk about we need to uh, the failure of the American system is the regulation of these, of these different private entities. I agree, but the failure. But I also believe that these uh, regulatory practices are also a result, are just a natural, or I also believe that uh, this huge hoarding of wealth is just the natural conclusion of this of the private ownership model. Um, And I don't know how it is specifically in Norway, but in many countries outside, even outside of Norway, that have been social democracies, like this accumulation of I'm not even gonna say many countries, this accumulation of wealth, I feel it's made much easier in America, not just because our government doesn't care at all, but also just because of the size of our market. Like it has a huge market, and there's a lot more ways for it to fall under the cracks. Now, for Norway specifically, I would say the even with you guys as a gleaming social democracy, I would say that the even taking that into account, the private ownership model, the public ownership model, would still be better than a social democracy because uh, fundamentally, it's about having power over your workplace, and public and worker co-ops have been shown to work better, just in general, than private owned companies.
I haven't seen that, but maybe.
Yeah, that's we can argue about that a little about the intricacies of
To be
that.
fair, there haven't been a ton of them either.
Right, right. Well, there's this big research document I've seen on worker co-ops and how they can weather financial hardship better. Um,
Mhm.
but I just think that the private ownership model doesn't really it doesn't really, how should I say it? The private ownership model isn't really ready, or it doesn't have the tools by which to deal with the big problems that are gonna come up in the future.
You mean like automation and
Automation, global warming, and a bunch of other stuff.
um, I think that if there was enough profit in things like global global warming, it would probably be uh, more challenged by private investors, or it would
Well,
be more like they would definitely be more incentivized to try and do greater things. Although the fact of the matter is that a lot of public institutions have failed in that aspect too. In Norway, it wasn't the private industry that shut down nuclear research; it was the public one. Uh,
oh yeah,
and I think that in the instance of actually dealing with global warming, thorium reactors is probably one of the best options. And I know there has been private companies that have wanted to try and research within thorium energy, but that's been completely shut down in Norway due to the state not wanting that at all.
yeah. Well, it's
Um,
because the
that's sort
nuclear
of
sounds
also a
scary.
thing, though, which is that, yeah, but the thing is that if you research thorium reactors, you'll see that it isn't really that scary,
Yeah. Uh,
at least not
yeah.
compared to conventional nuclear energy.
I've seen a lot of stuff on how thorium reactors, thorium energy is
Yeah.
based, and super cool. But uh, my point is, my point still stands. Is well, a lot of the research being done on global warming isn't through public or private institutions. It's by NGOs at this point. That's who funds most research in general. The thing is,
Well, my point there was really just that sometimes there actually are incentives for the private market to try and research
oh yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah. I get what you mean.
how
There
to
are
deal with it.
incentives
Yeah,
sometimes, but that's
yeah,
my
and
that's my issue with the private ownership model is that all of it is based on monetary incentives and commodity incentive and how can we make a profit off this instead of how will this help the most people.
I think that that's the primary one, but a lot of smaller private companies do have the whole how do we help people angle too. Yeah, the bigger the conglomerate, the bigger chance that they'll just gloss over people and ignore everyone else as they ruin everything. Uh, but under your system, even those smaller private
Mhm.
sectors would be eradicated.
What do you mean eradicated? Like the
Like, okay, like they would be turned into worker co-ops, I guess, or
oh I
state
see.
or publicly owned. They, like, even if those had good intentions, even if you can find examples of smaller companies doing good, you would still sort of remove them from, well, not really remove them, that's not fair to say. You would change them into being publicly owned.
Right, but if it's publicly owned, then their incentives will align with the incentives of most people, and the incentives of most people with the need of most people. You know, right now we're providing. I think it's called perverse incentives, and we're
I mean, I
there.
think I think like just to be clear, like I don't think it would necessarily align with what's best for people, but what people think is best.
Yeah, yeah.
And those can be very different.
Well, yeah, that's the problem of manufacturing consent. Um, that
Yeah, and that's also a good thing with private sector, which is that they don't necessarily have to deal with what the public thinks. And you can say that it's manufactured consent, but sometimes it's just um, like I don't like with nuclear energy again. I don't think people dislike it because of manufactured consent. Con- yeah, they dislike it because they have a little knowledge about it, but don't have a lot of knowledge of it, and they don't really have an interest in researching that specific topic
well,
a lot.
that's also part of education. Is that people, we aren't really
You have like I mean, I would say that yeah, but you have limits on how well you can educate people within a given time frame. And I'd say that as the education system currently is, it's already starting to be overburdened. I
Um,
think that school in general needs a minor revolution almost.
yeah. Well, that's one of the things anarchists always talk about is get rid of the. We have what's called the Prussian education system, which is uh, the school system is made to like make people good citizens for the state instead of actually like trying to help people learn. The goal is to make good citizens, not to make good thinkers, etc.
I would just say that the current school system doesn't really try to make good thinkers either. It just tries to make.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is they're not trying to make good
Oh,
thinkers; they're trying to make good citizens.
oh, okay.
Um, yeah, yeah. There's that's whole educational thing. I agree that nuclear energy would be the most, but
Yeah,
that
but
is
that's not something the public thinks.
right, right. But that is another thing. Is I guess not nationalization, but appropriation. Nationalization in this context would work is the nationalization of public resources. It's things like energy and water and et cetera, where and electricity. Where in this
We
country,
actually had
hmm? You had that.
first. No, you first. Go on.
Oh, okay. Well, in this country, all that stuff is privatized. I pay money to water company. I pay
Sure.
money to energy company. All of that privatized. I think personally, the Tesla thing, that's pretty ridiculous. I mean, the fact this is stuff. I think it's ridiculous that there's a profit motive for this. This is stuff that people need. It's just like healthcare. This isn't a commodity. It is a need, and we need to give it to as many people as possible.
I mean, some of those things, well, actually, a lot of those things were nationalized in Norway too. Energy was for a long time primarily produced by the state, although we have in recent times started to discuss about whether or not to somewhat privatize it through stocks.
Mm,
And yeah, I know it's questionable. And say like the telephone industry, if
yeah.
you went back 50 years ago, uh, the everything relating to telephones was also completely nationalized. I'm uncertain about water, but I think that's to some extent operated by the state still. But the thing is that you still paid for a lot of those, um,
Yeah.
paid
Well,
for
my
a lot
point
of
is
those
that this,
goods.
I just real quick, is my point is this is a big thing of socialism is the decommodification of the economy, where there is some commodities, but things people need to operate in daily life. These things shouldn't be commodities. These should be just be things you're given because why would you
I mean,
put a paywall between you and that?
the thing though is that most of those things are finite, so I'm not sure it would be fair to say that people shouldn't have to pay for electricity when some people might use way more than others.
I mean, maybe through taxes. Well, it depends what those people are doing. I mean, like company a company doing scientific
Well,
research, yeah, is probably going to produce way more, going to use it way more than others.
well, sure, but I mean, you can take examples of private people doing that too. I mean, I would imagine that under such a system, private people would still try to abuse it if they could.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I
any
mean,
system
even
can be
under
abused.
like, yeah, but like the thing though is that if you have to pay for it a fair price, then you can't really abuse electricity that much, for instance. Like, it's very difficult to abuse something you have to pay for. Now, the trick there is to prevent the person supplying it from not abusing their rights by overpricing the product.
Well, one thing
And
is,
that obviously needs either to be regulated or, yeah, you can nationalize it. I mean, again, I'm not against nationalizing those
yeah,
specific things.
yeah, but the way I see it is, maybe the exact details of how nationalized, decommodified, um, society would work is murky. I'm not a policymaker, so I can't give all the answers. But the way I see it is in a system where without the monetary incentive and just the incentive of okay, these are my fellow citizens, I need to help them get what they want. I think that even if there are some abuses in that system, like it would be, I would prefer that than having a system where some people can't get this very necessary um, thing by which to continue daily life. You know?
Um, I think there's very few examples of people not being able to afford said goods, and technically water is free, although not hot water.
Mm.
And in
Well, at least in my country, there's
and
many
a lot of
examples
the
of people not being able to afford it.
yeah, 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 you're being deprived of it because
Mm.
you might not be able to afford it, or they have monopolies that make it so expensive that it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
or like what happened in California, where they didn't take care of the infrastructure well enough. They didn't put enough
sure,
funds into taking care of the infrastructure, and so it just shut down.
sure. It's actually interesting because I just remembered. So my dad, right?
Mhm.
He lives in like a small village in the middle of nowhere,
Yeah.
right? And the thing though is that they had private water for a long time. The thing though is that the state, through legislation, enforced that they would now have to go on the national water system, right?
Mm.
And the thing, though, which is kind of funny, is that the water quality was greatly reduced.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, I'm not.
and the thing, like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
sort of also the thing, though, is that when you only have the national one, you do kind of have to worry that if there are no alternatives, if this goes bad, the state won't necessarily come and fix it as long as it meets a certain standard, even if that standard is kind of iffy.
Yeah. Yeah. I get what you mean.
Like, yeah,
Yeah, like here, well, at least in here in America, it's the standards. Even if you break them, the state won't care. Um, but
sure, it's a
uh,
problem too.
I'm not. I don't think the government should take care of should take over everything. In fact, most of the time, I'm much more for decentralized worker own or decentralized models of organization, even for the government. Which is why I'm saying like I value democracy a lot. I think in the conservative thing is like the government is too big, and I'm always like I agree. Let's make it more democratic and make it more decentralized to worry about specific to make it care more about specific situations or so people in specific areas can have more power by which to uh, change their situation for the better and stuff. I agree. Now, in the case of Norway's decentralized or Norway's water thing, um, the the way I see it is that it's a problem with like too too much centralization. Um, your dad, what I'm saying is like, why is it that your dad can't get that same level of water, but also, have a get that same standard of water, but also not have to have it behind a paywall? I don't think there's any reason why that shouldn't be the case.
I mean, yeah, that's fine. I mean, obviously, having a good standard of water shouldn't inherently be behind a paywall that you can't afford.
Mm.
Um,
Even if you can't afford it, I'm just thinking like, why the hell do you have to? What's the point?
I mean, you do pay through taxes normally
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, through taxes
Yeah,
to make sure the infrastructure
yeah,
of the government is running everything. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, that's. fine. I'm not inherently disagreeing. Actually, like when it comes to the private sector again,
Yeah.
it was private. This is actually going to be something that you're gonna jerk off to and be happy about.
Ooh, I'm ready.
Which is yeah, yeah. It was technically locally owned, from what I understood. The private one before that, so you could technically say the water was co-opted
Oh, it was like a
by the
mutualist
village.
thing.
I'm not quite sure about the details though, so I can't really say too much about it. I just know the overall details.
Oh. Oh, so it was like it was from the water in that case was from like a local company or was from,
Uh, I'm not quite sure. If I
right.
said anything, I would be telling you in like ignorance. So,
Well, look, mutualism is based. I think I think how much do you know about mutualism actually?
only a little.
Yeah, I'm not a big expert on it too. Proudhon talked about it how every community should
Yeah,
have their own bank and that they all pool money into and their own bank like a credit union is technically a mutualist kind of thing where these companies are all owned by the local community and they uh, decide democratically on how it works. Um, eh, there is really complicated, but yeah, I think this I yeah, I'd prefer uh, localized, decentralized structures over
yeah,
large central bureaucratic structures anytime. Um,
yeah,
I
yeah. Like say that. Yeah, we are one of the more decentralized countries. I mean, we are a relatively big country for very few people, although most of it isn't that livable.
yeah.
But during like the 70s, we did sort of the opposite of Sweden, which was that we wanted to decentralize the country while they centralized it. So we have our population really spread out. So our country is really expensive to drift
Yeah, and
in
also don't you
general.
like isn't the border between
Um,
you guys and Sweden like non-existent?
yeah, I mean, it technically does exist, and you can technically be stopped. It's just very unlikely.
Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, like you can just cross it and it's fine. I mean, it's not uncommon for people here to drive over to Sweden to buy stuff there because it's slightly cheaper.
That's the
They don't
modern
have,
Viking raids.
yeah, yeah, pretty much. I mean, like people will genuinely just go over there when they get paid and come back in with like their whole car filled with goods
Jesus.
because it's cheaper there. So some people aren't interested in necessarily buying from local um, stores when it's so much cheaper in Sweden.
Yeah, yeah. I felt
Yeah,
when I was near the Canada border, I couldn't exercise that right as much as you probably could.
yeah. I mean, we don't have border control really. I mean, again, technically, there's a very slim border control,
Yeah,
and I've never been stopped, and I've gone to Sweden a couple of times. So,
that's
I mean, that's
for an
pretty
American.
chill.
That's crazy to think about.
Yeah, and like alcohol is really expensive here, so people just go to Sweden where it's super cheap comparatively.
Mm.
Which is kind of funny because Swedes go to Denmark and get really cheap beer there.
You're all just going to each other's countries. It's like a
Yeah,
vicious cycle.
yeah, yeah.
Mm. But
We do have a lot of tax, so
you're saying that's Norway is decentralized a lot.
yeah. I mean, lately, throughout the last years, we have started to centralize more,
Mm.
which has been met with great opposition because we have like states too, and a couple of them they've just been merged into one.
Oh, is that like some weird gerrymandering thing?
Yeah,
Ugh,
no, we
love
don't
that.
have gerrymandering. No, it's nothing to do with that. It's just like the whole state has been just merged because Like the argument stems from the fact that like the biggest city in North Norway is Tromsø, and it has 50,000 people living there, right? And that's like
Jesus.
that's a big city in North Norway, right? And that's nothing really
Mm.
compared to, you know,
New
everywhere
York.
else. So yeah, yeah. I mean, New York has like a bigger population than all of Norway.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about.
Insane. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All of our cities smaller than New York in population. So the thing though is that um, I think a recent one was Finnmark Troms,
Mm.
which is like two states, and they've been merged. And the thing is that they are really massive, but they're also fairly desolate, low population. And the idea is that, oh, if we do this, we will reduce costs, right?
Yeah, but wouldn't it be easier just to keep it like decentralized and let people do their own thing?
I mean, of our like the whole argument is that it's insanely expensive to drift Norway, and if we merge states, then it'll be relatively way cheaper.
I see.
Again, this is a very unpopular policy, generally speaking, though. It's just it happens anyway.
Well, well, yeah, because generally, like people would prefer just um, just doing their own thing and not
Yeah,
having to be bothered by the government. I mean, that's kind of like the
gonna be
whole
merged.
that's kind of like the whole impetus of anarchism. I know I said I wasn't gonna get into it very much, but like the whole impetus is like most people would just like to do their work and be left alone and not have to deal with the government most of the time.
Tisk tisk bellsniffer, tisk tisk.
I
Always
know,
going back to
I
anarchism.
know,
No, it's fine.
I
I
know.
mean, yeah, sure, but I mean, this is just an instance of you can't really fight more power. You can't really fight the majority easily. So, like in the
Yeah.
instance of us being centralized, technically through force,
Hmm. Well, I mean, Norway is a state.
um,
Like it is through force, technically.
sure, sure. But it's also partially the will of the people because people have voted in officials that have said that, oh, we're going to do this. It's just like obviously Oslo, which has like a
Hmm.
million citizens, will have
That
way
big of a
more power over everyone else
yeah.
due to numbers alone. But I mean, that's part of true democracy, right? Which is that small places like that with a lot of citizens can technically, um, you know, rule over everyone else who's in a minority.
Yeah, that's it's the well, that's why I always advocate for like more decentralized structures. So those small places still have power to, uh, you know, help themselves and make themselves
Sure.
known.
I mean, our
Um,
states do have a lot of power too.
yeah,
They do get like an annual budget, and
yeah.
I
Hmm.
guess they're somewhat comparable to yours, except that they don't really have the same level of like federal versus state laws, for instance, right? You can't go to another state and then expect weed to be legal there, right?
Hey, well, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's not
yeah,
much variation in the states. That's one of the things I love about the U.S.
yeah,
is how much variation there is in the states. Like, I live in New York, and going to
sure.
California is so different. Um,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the variations tend to be strategies and how are you going to implement X and
yeah,
Y.
yeah. To bring it back to the socialism Demsov thing, uh, that's
Yeah,
actually one of the reasons I am against capitalism is because capitalism is so the capitalist private entities are such centralized bureaucratic structures. You know, I always say like, name me a
sure.
more bureaucratic
But I mean,
entity than McDonald's.
sure, but I think like in the instance of like in this instance, it's not the private sector that's trying to centralize, it's the
Mm,
public. It's the
yeah,
social aspect of the social democracy. It's not
yeah.
like private companies are hoping for it.
Well, there's also the question of like, how much do our representatives really represent us?
I mean, sure. Uh,
Um,
it it's not always that the representatives are being represented by like um yeah, when someone is elected official in Norway, like state minister, and their party is the head of state,
Mm.
then that will obviously be less decided by North Norway, which has a way lower population than the south in Norway.
Yeah. So the model I really like is how they do it in the Rojava and the Zapatista controlled areas in Mexico, where they're libertarian socialists. So they have this council system, and it's not that, one person, like one person is elected to represent their community. It's that the entire community comes together, votes on something, and then that goes up,
Mhm.
uh, and then that goes to the further federated communities, and then it goes up to the larger confederation. And that's generally how they make decisions and do voting and stuff.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
that way, a lot of the smaller communities still have like power to let their voices be heard.
yeah. I mean, we do have like systems where, like, we do have on a state level officials, right, that you
Mm.
can go and talk to.
Yeah, yeah,
And we do have like state elections actually for like mayors and everything.
right.
Um,
Mm.
obviously, not as
Not a council
prof-
system.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a representative system. I mean, you're a representative democracy.
yeah.
Yeah. The the democratic states, the so-called democratic states of the West have disappointed me a lot in my life. I don't know. I think the moving towards a more council system or more. eh, All I want is the most people possible to have the most power in making decisions that affect their daily lives.
Sure.
And yeah, yeah, I think I think the best way to do that is to move away from the private ownership model towards a more decentralized public ownership model. Like in you
I
go to a
actually have
small
a
town.
question here then. Like you said earlier that private co-ops were actually more proficient um, than private ones when it came to, I think, earning money, or was it something else?
Oh, it was that public that worker co-ops uh, are more efficient. They produce more labor than
Okay.
private companies, and that by
Labor.
producing more labor, they obviously produce more money. Yeah, it's
I
a
mean, the
direct
thing though is that like
number.
in my
Hmm.
country then, right?
Hmm.
Shouldn't that be the dominant model then?
Well, no, in because the best systems don't just arise out of nowhere. You have to fight for them. I mean, capitalism is a better model than feudalism. Then it took hundreds of years before feudalism was finally done away with.
Well, sure, but Norway sort of started from well, I wouldn't really say scratch, but we did start very poor. We did start with very little private enterprise here because
Well,
again, we were pretty much just a colonial state to Denmark and then Sweden, right?
yeah, yeah.
Uh, and I mean, the thing though is that in our system, we don't have the same, legal bribery as you do in the US. We don't have terrible regulations that allow horribly abusive strategies, although there are definitely abusive strategies here too.
Mhm.
So co-ops should definitely be more dominant, I think, if they were just generally more efficient.
Um, no, not necessarily. Uh, just because there's a more efficient system doesn't mean that people are gonna take to it immediately. Um,
Yeah.
like like you said, Norway kind of started from scratch, but it also started around most of West being part of most of Western Europe. Um, so it also had the huge influence of private interests and capitalist interests and
I
stuff.
mean,
And that's not
biggest
the only reason, but yeah.
well, one of our biggest companies actually is a co-op, yeah, but
Mhm.
it's not the dominant form. And the thing though is that that's been a thing since the 20s. said company, Coop.
Yeah, there's not as much
Like this,
of an
yeah.
aversion there as it is here to the
Thing like
whole
the
thing in
thing is
general.
that even then, like generally speaking, there aren't really almost any companies here, as far as I know, that are co-ops. It's primarily just that,
Mm,
just one big conglomerate, really, which is the co-op.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's like I said,
Mm.
like people.
Yeah, okay, it'll
Yeah,
take
yeah,
time, sure. It's just that I feel like if it was always more efficient, like maybe it generally is more efficient, but I think that maybe it suffers from the whole. You kind of like to start a company, you either need to have a strategy or an idea that will actually be profitable.
right.
And the
Yeah,
co-op is more about drifting than the idea. And when you have an idea, then it'll just default to the normal one person owns the company because they don't want to um, let it be a co-op.
yeah.
Being
There's
no good.
it's a weird
Yeah,
will to
and that,
power kind of thing.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, sure. But I mean, I think that like it's it seems like it's more appealing. Like Big Gay Trap, right? Yeah, I remember like yeah, okay. Like I remember him like saying once that the reason why like communism failed is because we just implemented social democracy to make people complacent so that they didn't want communism any longer.
oh my god.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah. He said that, and that's sort of like no, I don't think that we didn't just stop wanting communism because social democracy made us complacent. I think that social democracy just ended up being really good. People really enjoyed the system compared to a lot of previous systems.
Uh,
Um,
well, well, I mean, again,
and think like again like the whole
mhm,
appeal of social democracy is that you can still have a strong state that nationalizes things like power grids and water, but
mhm.
still have the appeal of saying you can still be, your own little king in this very specific realm as long as you follow these rules.
Yeah, but isn't it also weird to like that you have give people the incentive of you can you can be your own little monarch. Like, shouldn't we be trying to get away from the whole you can be your own little monarch and just let people be workers and do their thing? I don't know.
I mean,
I
I
find
mean,
that to
the,
be a kind of perverse incentive. I just feel like.
I mean, maybe it is perverse, but I feel like not everybody plays video games. Not everybody has um,
Not everyone's a
some
pro
people want
gamer.
to live out their like some people want to live out their power fantasy in the sense that they rise to the top, that they get ahead of everyone else, and I don't really have a problem with that as long as they get it through a fair means, a means that doesn't abuse people.
Well,
If they're incentivized to get at the top of the system, then odds are that they'll benefit the system is high too.
not necessarily. I mean, you can get to the top of a system
Oh yeah,
again,
yeah, yeah,
like a
yeah.
hive
Again, like
mind
if you abuse the system, like if you abuse the system, then obviously it'll be vastly negative more so than beneficial. But I mean, having a drive and having an idea does help, and you do get a bigger like you would like concede that saying that, oh, if you have a really good idea and you worked really hard, then you can be your own little petty king. It does sound kind of appealing, doesn't it?
I mean, it sounds appealing, but I don't think we should structure an economic system around it.
You don't really structure it just around that. It's more that you just permit
You
it
kind of
in the
do.
system.
You
Not
kind of do.
just.
Like our job, or if you work in the private sector, your job's kind of like a is kind of like being under a petty princedom where you don't
I
really have
mean,
a say in how things go or what's happening. You just do your thing.
actually, like in Norway, you actually have representatives within the company, which has to be one of the employees that is elected by the employees, and they actually will have like I don't know all of the specifics, and it's technically just for companies which is bigger than so big.
Yeah, yeah.
But they have like the right to complain, I guess, and with it to the union, right? Well, I mean, obviously, like the right to complain, everyone has the right to complain.
Yeah.
But there's a specific representative that's elected that can sort of come with minor demands or corrections, and every employee,
What was that?
right?
You cut out every employee.
Sorry. Oh, like and every employee can go and talk to them, right?
Uh,
If there is an issue.
oh, that is not the case here.
It's not
Our
sure.
unions are
Yeah,
incredibly
I mean,
centralized and not work for the employees.
are way more for the employees.
Yeah.
So, and see that, like, I think I brought this up earlier too, which is that I think that part of the reason why you see capitalism as such a failure, while I don't think it is one, is because you live in a country where capitalism has failed immensely,
Um,
and the social institution hasn't helped.
I don't know if I'd say capitalism as a failure. I mean, for what if it was,
Well,
for what it's
kind
supposed
of.
to do, for what if it's supposed to do, like capitalism is supposed to, depending on what you feel it's supposed to do, it's supposed to enrich a certain class of people, which it's done very well.
I think,
So in
like,
that
I
case, it
think,
was a,
I mean, I would redefine, like, yeah, technically that, but I would just say that it's there to generate as much wealth as possible.
yes. And in the
Yeah.
class of a specific, and within a specific class of people, um,
Well,
which is
but I mean,
which it's
the
done that
thing
very
though is
well,
that,
and it has
I
generated
mean,
wealth very well. But the question
yeah,
is not just like, um, it's not that it's a failure, and more that why is society structured in such a way where all all we have are profit incentives? Why don't we have instead incentives to based on need and based on helping our fellow citizens. Like if I if someone told me, hey Jose, if you work this mill for a few hours a day, then you can help uplift the lives of hundreds of people. Uh, I'd be like, yeah, sure, whatever. I'll work the mill. Like,
yeah. But I mean, I think that at least in Norway we have that system already. It's just that not everyone is appealed by that, and some people are way more appealed by, hey, you can you can earn a lot of money if you do a real good job.
I would
And
say
yeah,
in my
that's
system, you can
obviously,
even in the system I want, you could probably earn more money. Just any average worker could probably earn more money. Because normally, a lot of the profits that you make from labor are just going to enrich the top, enrich the CEO. But if you put a cap on how much a CEO can make or how much a manager can make, as is the case in many worker co-ops, I think the Mondragon Corporation, their thing, I usually don't like using them as an example because they're not really the model I would really want. But they have, I think it's like a 10-1 or 6-1 is the 16-1 uh, is the average ratio of pay between employees and CEOs. So something like that, um, I think would be much better at making it so enriching the lives of people than just than social welfare programs. I mean, social welfare programs obviously that too,
like,
but yeah,
I don't know for certain, but I've heard rumors that apparently Japan has like a cap where CEOs can't earn so much more than an employee.
yeah, I heard that too. I don't know the
Yeah,
specifics of it though.
I have. Yeah, like I've heard like, oh, they can earn like 1,000 times more than an employee, but no more than that. But I have no idea if that's true. It's just something I've heard.
But also, I think an incentive of you actually have control on what goes on in your workplace would make society even way more productive, even more efficient. You know, if in
I mean, well,
mm,
already the case in Norway though, you do have like you are allowed to like
yeah,
come with complaints and have a certain right to demand improvements
I
in
mean,
the workplace.
technically you have that here too. It's just
Yeah, but I think that we have a bit more
it's more meaningful
rights.
in Norway.
Yeah, yeah.
it gets more done as opposed to here where you file a complaint in the complaint box and it's just, whoop, uh, yeah,
Yeah,
whatever.
or you complain and you're called into the office the next day.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
I think,
yeah.
well, I think the difference in,
But
oh, what were you saying?
so that I just think that social democracy appeals to more people than socialism.
Well, how many people would how many people it appeals to is kind
Ooh,
of an argument
popularity
from,
contest.
huh?
Popularity contest, you mean?
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
an argument from
No, no.
arguments in my popular
Yeah, but
dependence.
like, I mean, any system should appeal to people. If it doesn't appeal to people, why have it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I
but
mean,
I think the reason it doesn't, I think the reason socialism or even just regular market socialism doesn't appeal to people is because the lefties suck at getting these ideas to out there to people. Because
I think it's like I think it's also just due to the fact that people enjoy what capitalism has produced, which is consumerism. That
I don't
that's
know
probably like
though,
one of the
because there's a huge market for people who hate consumerism.
it's kind of ironic because that like consumerism has created a market separate,
For
like where you're
anti-consumerist
again,
practices.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
the
But I mean,
commodification of
like,
everything under capitalism.
yeah, but like the irony of that is that often, even in like the instances of like anti-consumerism, you're still technically participating in some aspect of consumerism, replacing goods.
Well, oh yeah, it's the whole there's no
Yeah,
ethical consumption under capitalism thing. Yeah.
I
Uh,
mean, not like I mean, I wouldn't even say that really. I think there's ethical consumption under capitalism. I just think that
mm, well, it's like the whole thing is that
I
like
mean, you can.
you can take
I mean,
think of a company like making that makes your laptop or something. Take it, go to however that thing is produced, and at some point you'll find someone being exploited
sure,
and
sure,
mistreated.
sure. I'm not gonna deny that. But I think I'm gonna just make like a very simple argument of like if you go to a farmer and buy something from them, for instance, it's not necessarily an ethical consumption of them.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking more like even in this where you're like anti-consumerist and you buy stuff, it's often produced specifically with the intent of selling it at a higher price.
Hello?
Welcome back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're talking about how capitalism, consumerism is something desired.
Well, yeah, kind of. I
Yeah,
mean, it's like, I mean, even though I realize it's bad, it's very appealing that whenever I want to, I can just throw away my old laptop and go buy a new one.
well, what if whenever you wanted to, you could just uh, throw away your old laptop and just go get a new one from the communal laptop makers or whatever.
I mean, if it's just that
Like
easy, and that would be more
the
appealing.
communal
But
laptop
but I
stores.
mean,
Well, this is
but I
something
mean,
the
you.
CNT did. Is the CNT they rolled into a town. What they did was get rid of all the white collar jobs, get rid of money, and saw if anything changed. Nothing changed,
Yep.
and
Mhm.
people still went about their work. People still produced their goods, and the thing is, and those goods just were free. People went take their things and they gave it to other people who needed them.
I
Um,
mean, I have no idea about that example, so I can't really comment on whether or
yeah,
not it's that good.
the point is that I think we can get this people's wants and needs, and we can do it even
Well, yeah,
better outside of the private ownership system and within a needs based system.
I mean, the thing is that need is a bit loose, and technically speaking, you don't need a computer.
Well, yeah, yeah. But well, I mean, in
More of
some
a
cases you
luxury.
do.
I
Like,
mean, yeah, like you can find examples where you need it, but like I don't need like the newest graphic card RTX 10 million, you know?
hey, okay,
Uh,
listen. Let's not get crazy
but,
here.
like,
No, I
yeah.
get what you mean. That you don't. But at the same time, you also don't need we pretty much have as many hammers as we'll need for a very, very long time. Outside of
Sure.
repair and stuff. But with capitalism, then you make that manufactured scarcity. It's like, oh, this is now the kid's hammer. This is a pink hammer for girls or whatever. And you need to find new ways of, selling the product. And I just don't think that system is very. I don't believe that system is sustainable.
In what context? You mean
Well, in
like
the context
sustainable in
of,
the sense that
well, it's kind of
the
like
world is being.
it's kind of like a pyramid scheme of like the pyramid scheme relies on exponential growth, and capitalism also, the way we've set up our economies, rely on continuous growth. I don't think a system based on continuous growth is sustainable. Um, I
I
think
mean,
it'd
I
be
don't even
much.
think that capitalism has to like. I don't think capitalism has to rely on permanent growth. I don't think that it has to forever just grow and grow and grow. Obviously, there comes like a roof somewhere. There's
Well, it
only
kind of
like a fine.
does. It kind of does
Yeah,
because the model is based on getting more customers and getting more people to buy your product. And for that, you need more people to keep coming and coming and coming. And I don't think that's sustainable. We can get
I mean,
into.
you obviously
Yeah.
you first, baby.
Well, no, I was just gonna say like the resource scarcity thing is a whole other issue that we don't even have to get into at this case. In this case, but yeah, I don't think a model based on commodities is sustainable. I think a model based on what people need and how to get that to as many people as possible is the most sensical. Is the one that makes the most sense.
I mean, the thing though is that we want things we don't need too, though. A lot of it too. Again, like with
Yeah.
the toy hammer, you don't need a toy hammer, but your kid might genuinely want one.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, and like again, like you don't really need the newest graphic card, but you might want it because you have interests that it
Well,
would be good
well,
at.
that's another thing is that a lot of these things are created with planned obsolescence. Um, you know, uh, they're
I
created
mean,
knowing that like in a few years they'll go bad and someone will have to come back and buy more stuff. You know.
I
Uh,
mean, I would say like a lot of those like obviously planned obsolescence can include like, oh, the thing will just be that it won't be interesting or it will break. But I mean, in like the instance of computers, for instance, it was just that progress was being made. There was too much progress
well, it's a,
within a rapid succession.
well in the case of computers, there's a whole there's a whole school of anarchism talking about like the case of computers. Uh, like
Like, oh, they're artificially.
anarcho-transhumanism is a lot of people think it's just robot arms. It's actually about like the creation of new technology and
Sure.
making them on transparent lines and stuff. It
Hmm.
deals with technology in general. Um, I don't know exactly how computers are produced, but um, I believe in an or how should I say, uh, in a case of in a market system, there are going to be things that the market wants. Now, I like markets. I like free markets. They're pretty cool. I genuinely, I want to do away with them at one point and move to a more anarchist system. But for the most, in the immediate sense, I like markets. And I think we can have a market, but also, um, you know, enjoy all the fruits of our labor and get within a system that its primary goal isn't profit, but its primary goal is to take care of its people.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it's not too unfair to bring up, but the Soviet Union kind of did do the whole buy needs thing.
Yeah,
Um, like way fewer people had cars, but they were delegated more carefully. But it was still kind of slow. Like you had to apply for a car and then be on a wait list for it.
yeah.
Uh,
And
and that's sort of like again, and that's not a very comfortable thing, which is something that social democracy sort of fixes to some extent.
I'm not. Well, I'm not a
Like
fan of
in
this.
like fixing might be a strong word, but in the sense that it does supply that a lot faster than under the Soviet Union.
I think,
And yeah, you mentioned.
yeah,
Hmm?
I don't believe the Soviet Union. You're not going to catch me defending the Soviet Union. Trust me.
I mean,
I'm a
it did
minute
have
from it.
positive aspects because
Oh
yeah,
no, it definitely
like
had
you said,
positive aspects.
yeah,
Don't get me wrong. I generally, when I talk about a model for society, the Soviet Union is not the first one that comes to mind. Um,
sure, but I mean, to
it
some
annoys me
extent,
how.
it did do a lot of what socialism is trying to do.
Oh
You
yeah,
could say
yeah.
that it failed.
It definitely tried to. They gave it they gave it their best shot. Let's say. Um, I
Sure.
just I don't believe that the Soviet Union is was. I don't like MLs. I don't like Marxist-Leninists or tankies. I don't defend the Soviet Union. I don't really
I
want to.
mean,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But to get back on point is uh, in the model I'm proposing, you can still have that market. There will still be commodities,
yeah,
stuff that people will need.
sure,
But I think
but I mean, was a market in the Soviet Union too. It's just that the state sort of decided on it.
yeah, it's like the China thing. The people, the market is free. The people aren't.
Yeah. The thing though is that under your system, like socialism too, like a purely socialistic system, people wouldn't necessarily have um, like there isn't a monetary incentive to produce so many cars that everyone has one, for instance.
Mm, I mean, well,
And
well, in the system I propose,
necessarily,
I think we'd try to get away from driving cars to and more towards public transport and stuff. Because
I mean, like it's kind of funny because if you want that, then you said earlier that you wanted to decentralize everything, right? Like decentralize as much as possible.
uh,
The thing though is that
yeah, yeah, generally.
yeah, like
Uh,
yeah, like I mean,
well, I like
you
bottom up
can't realistically
structures. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, like in like Norway, you can't realistically have public transportation everywhere.
Mm.
You need cars in some places a lot.
But well, where I
Again,
live, I need a car. I need a car as well to go do stuff. Well,
sure.
but that's also because our public transportation is so bad.
I mean, the same could be said in some areas here too, like really, really bad, but it's also because it would be low key wasted in some areas. You just can't really have a lot of buses to a place where no one takes them.
I was uh, I was more train posting there, but I get what you mean. Well, well, that's the thing is
Sure.
objectively these
Oh,
I would say objectively these small towns would benefit a lot from
yeah.
having more trains going from connecting the country and having a better rail
Well,
system and stuff. But
sure.
there's just no real profit incentive for stuff, and especially here in America where all our trains companies are privately owned. Um, there's no profit
Well,
incentive towards make it really better.
sure. You with that again, like I want a strong state that would supplement those things. I want expansion of the infrastructure. Um, in the instance of Norway, like I don't think you fully grasp how desolate some places are.
Let me tell you, Cal, there are some
Uh,
desolate parts of America. Holy shit!
sure, no, like America is way bigger and has a lot of these completely remote places that there's one person living in the
Like there
middle
are
of
some
nowhere, right?
districts. Have you ever
Yeah.
seen that like a map, that like electoral map where like most of the districts are red, and then and that's because like one person is living there. But when you take out like the places where only like a person lives and
Yeah.
no one else is living there,
Yeah.
like most of the map is just gray.
Yeah. It's pretty. The US is a really big place, so yeah, it's not
We're
surprising.
fucking
You
huge.
definitely do have like a lot of places where it's way more desolate than here. It's just that I think that like
Well, Norway's really mountainous too, right? Like that's also a problem.
I mean, kinda. I mean, Switzerland is fairly mountainous too. I mean, they're smaller
Uh, I just remember
and
it from. I just
more
remember it from.
centralized.
I just thinking of every time I tried to invade Norway in a Hearts of Iron game. To like
Yeah,
all the
shouldn't
mountains
do
behind
that.
me, all the
Yeah,
fucking mountains, dude. But yeah,
yeah.
um,
But like again, you have like very small villages, 200, 300, 500 people living, and you have those spread all over the country,
yeah.
especially in North Norway.
Mm.
And you can't really have like a train station that is very comprehensive. Like there's actually like a big desire from the left to create a comprehensive train system though,
Hmm.
like
Well,
from the south to the north.
train posting, dude. Yeah.
Yeah,
I well, objectively, just like a better infrastructure to one of my big things, and one of the things I think is really stifled under capitalism is the free and open movement of peoples, which is weird because you'd think like a lot of early liberal thought was like very globalist, like the free and open movement of peoples and capital should be complete, like there should be no limits to it. Everyone should be able to go wherever they want and you know sell their capital
yeah.
however
You mean
they
like
wish.
close
So
border and stuff.
yeah. But
Well,
like now,
I'm not really for open borders, so
yeah, I'm not for open borders now either. Like in the future, like a long time.
sure. But
Um,
I mean, you can
but
always say that in the future one day though.
In the
I mean,
future we'll all
in
be
the future, yeah,
in the
in the
future we'll all be
future
living in
one
the
day,
anarcho-syndicalist paradise, whatever.
no, in the future we'll all be living in flying cities, so we don't obstruct the Earth and
Dude,
animals.
don't make me think of flying cities. I had like a 30-minute argument with someone about flying cities the other day.
We can have realistically flying cities on Venus. There's actually like NASA plans where you could implement that and colonize it in the sky.
Maybe if like the corrosive atmosphere doesn't kill us, maybe we can have our commune on
You would
Venus.
be you would be so far up that the corrosive elements in the atmosphere wouldn't reach.
Maybe maybe we can have our anarchists anarcho transhumanist commune on Venus.
Yeah, would be
Yeah,
just like Dead Space 2.
exactly. Um, but
Yeah,
oh, dude, we've been talking for like 2 hours. Holy shit!
a
Oh man,
perfect amount. A video with like a healthy amount.
yeah, that is a healthy amount to put on a video. You wanna?
There's still
You, I was gonna say, you wanna have any closing statements, or you wanna keep going?
like I'm up for keeping
I can keep
try to
train
close
posting if you
off.
want. I'm down.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I don't have anything better to do. It's 5
that makes
a.m.
me feel
here.
so good. All right, now we can keep going for a little bit. So what I was getting at is a lot of these dude, you ever if you ever like drive through America, there's so many of these like of these small towns with that have nothing but a
Yeah.
McDonald's, a gas station, and maybe like a hardware store or two. And
You
then
see, that's the thing though. Like that McDonald's is like half of the heart of the city, you know?
yeah, exactly. And it's so sad to me. Like these small
Yeah, but at the
communities.
same time, yeah, but
Mm.
like, shouldn't you at the same time be thanking the McDonald's, you know? Thank you, capitalism.
uh,
Like,
I don't think I'm gonna be
you
thanking
gotta give it.
McDonald's anytime soon.
Yeah, you gotta give it to them.
Well,
Like they're everywhere. Like if you can squeeze a dime out of someone, then they're there.
yeah, but that's the thing is that like a lot of these McDonald's are like the only restaurants in the town. Where a lot of like the
Hmm.
restaurants before were like pushed out of business because they're just McDonald's here. Fuck it, uh,
Yeah,
everyone's gonna eat there. It's so sad to me how so many of these like you lose a lot of that small town because there is a charm to small towns. Maybe this is just the American in me talking, but like there's this really big charm to these small communities. And their own little idiosyncrasies that is just
I think that
lost in this
yeah,
huge capitalist, blob.
but I mean, all of that will like it's not just mega conglomerates that's really pushing businesses out. Even mega conglomerates are being pushed out by the internet. Like, I hear Walmart is low key struggling compared to what it was
Well, because of Amazon, because of a
due
new
to,
mega
yeah,
conglomerate
sure,
coming in.
sure, sure. But I mean, like, that's just how the world is going. Like, we want to buy shit online and not physically, I guess.
Yeah, well,
So I mean,
it's the consequence of the new market to the information age, market adapting
sure.
to the new information age. Yeah, taking it back to socialism. How I see it is a lot of this. You know, a, you think of something like the internet, and um, a lot of like lefties were like rejoicing, like, oh, this is the new experiment in how we'll you know organize and how people will how new
Oh yeah, and
strategy can be
then it's
structured, like
just
this new
yeah, and then it
frontier.
just becomes a new massive yeah, and then it
Yeah,
just
and then it
becomes a
becomes
new
just
massive hub of mega
co-opted by
conglomerates. Yeah,
capitalism and corporatized like everything else.
yeah, but I think it's just it's the will of the people. Say as you want. I mean,
Is it the
like it
will of
was
the
just
people
too
though?
appealing. I
Well,
mean,
yeah,
it kind of is
it
because people find it too appealing. Like it's too appealing to go to Amazon and buy shit than it is to like go to your local friendly neighborhood
well, yeah,
store.
because it's much easier. Yeah, it's much.
And like even like and that's the thing, like even in a socialist system you would kind of have to have an alternative to that, but it would be have to be kept artificially alive.
bread breadline prime. Yeah. Um,
But the thing is that like in our system it's being kept alive because people buy shit from there. But in socialism it would have to be like state mandated almost.
not necessarily. I think in a
Hmm.
socialist system, I think I was talking to Kenny about this. How like he was saying, I really like. I mean, I like what socialists talk about, but I really like my 1 day prime delivery system. And I was telling him like, well,
Mhm.
you can have the 1 day prime delivery system without horribly abusing your
Uh,
workers and breaking their bodies in
you
these
fell
huge
out there a
factories.
bit.
Huh?
You fell out there a bit, like
Oh,
after the
he was talking about like the Amazon Prime,
yeah,
1 day delivery stuff, and I said like, well, you
yeah,
can have that also in a system where the workers like have a say in what goes on, and they're not completely and horribly mistreated, and their bodies broken down, as what happens in Amazon now.
sure, sure. But I mean, you can have Amazon actually be more ethical without being in a socialist system. I mean, it's just that Amazon has been let loose. It doesn't have regulations. It doesn't care for its employees.
Well,
It doesn't
then,
try to. Uh, it doesn't try to actually let their employees live a decent life.
well, then it just gets into ar- the argument a lot of socialists talk about which is, can you have an ethical company under capitalism? Because under capitalism, kind of the point is that the workers are being ripped off by the capital owners. Like the capital owners aren't working, at least not as hard as the
I
workers.
mean, I,
Mhm.
I mean, the thing that like I guess we're gonna fundamentally disagree with because I think we mentioned this before when Kenny was there, and I remember him commenting saying, um, like, like you said that. Sorry, bad train of thought as usual here.
Yeah, it's fine.
Train gang.
Train posting.
Yeah, no, but like you said like as long as the employees doesn't like choose the wage of their employer, it's not a fair system. Or not really exactly that, but like
Well, I was saying that like as long as the surplus labor that the employee produces isn't being extracted by the employer, it's kind of an unfair system because that labor you're producing, that surplus labor that you produce, your employer didn't really do anything to get it. Your
I mean
employer could
that's not
work,
always
but
the case.
hmm, yeah.
That's not always the case though.
Well, I mean, your employer
Um,
works like they do some work, but they should be
sure.
paid according to the work they do and not really the work you do. Um,
I mean normally they're paid according to ownership.
right, and that's what I'm saying is
Um,
like other people own the
yeah,
stocks and they own that surplus labor. Um,
I mean, well, uh, and by well, I really mean like if you can have a good standard of living of the work you do, then that's a good basis already. Um,
well, isn't well that's the
I
thing
don't
is like
have
well that's the thing is like it's not just standard of living. I mean, people yeah well yeah like people generally just want to have enough to eat, enough to you know enough free time to go hang
like
out
when
with
I
their
mean like
friends and stuff.
good standard of living, I don't mean like you can just barely sustain yourself. I mean like you should have enough that when you're working, when you have like an, you should be able to easily afford your paying for your family. You should easily be able to buy a house. You should be able to go on vacation, have enough money for your hobbies, not live paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, I totally agree. No disagreements with
And
me
if
here.
those yeah, and like if those criterias are made, if those reached, if those criterias are reached, then I don't really mind an employer earning more.
Um, well, it's not just that they earn more; it's that they earn more from the labor you do. Um, and
Well, yeah, but like often you can have like say like an employer, yeah, an employer earns like 1.1 times what you make, right?
well, yeah, often
Off
you can
of
have
you.
that, but if you're talking about like
Yeah,
a big company like I don't know, like Amazon or something, like there's nothing like that. Um,
I mean,
I mean, even
yeah,
Amazon,
I guess
yeah,
Amazon can be said that, but I mean, part of why they earn so much is due to uh, like multiplying each of their profits off their employers. Like if they only had one employer, they wouldn't not one employee, they wouldn't realistically earn nearly as much as they do now,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is that like if
right?
Amazon only had
Sure,
one employee, then they couldn't. Amazon couldn't be run with more with less than like a few thousand.
sure, 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 but like they might only earn like 1.5 times what that employee earns, and then every employee they have after that, they might only earn 1.5 times what they earn again and again. And it's just that as they get more employees, the amount they earn off of each
It's an
employee
economy of
doesn't
scale kind of.
necessarily.
It's like the well, it's
Yeah,
a
yeah, it's scaling. Like it's just the numbers. Like when you have so many employees, you're gonna have big fucking profits. And even if each individually doesn't make you a big profit, the whole does.
I agree. I just think that those profits shouldn't just go to one person at the top, but those profits should be distributed evenly by the people who made those profits. And there's always going to be some money put aside to maintain the infrastructure like of the company, like keep the lights running, keep the trucks flowing and stuff.
Yeah, but I think that the whole like again being paid a fair wage thing is the distribution of that wealth. It's just that a good portion will still go to the top because outside of that fair wage comes sort of the reward
Yes,
you reap from
yeah, yeah,
building the system.
yeah. But the thing is, in the system I'm proposing, the workers would have would have power to decide as to how much those people on the top are making, and as to and if they feel like this person should make 20 times more than me because I just feel they work hard, they can convince their fellow employees to vote in that way.
But I mean, that would still be unfair if you made the company from scratch and then you built it up. And then when you then reach 15 employees and you suddenly switch to a co-op where the employees decide your wage, it sort of feels awful when if they suddenly decide to cut your salary heavily.
Well,
Like the whole system is that system is. was originally yours. You owned it until that co-op happened. You
Well,
owned it until
if if that's the case, then they can just not have they can just have less than 50 employees if they
sure. And I
wanted
mean
to
that's
own it.
going to happen too. I mean that's sort of the thing too, though, which is that you wouldn't even need in the future to have many employees. Like Amazon could probably automate a lot of their processes to the
I
point
mean,
where
they're
they
already
almost
doing it.
have
Yeah.
no. Yeah, 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 yeah. And the thing though is that as they have less and less employees, are we saying that they should no longer be a co-op if they then manage to somehow reach like 14 employees?
Yeah, then the waters get murky there. I'm not a market socialist. I'm just when I talk about market socialism, I always couch it in the sense of like I think this could solve a lot of the problems that exist in the current system. I don't know how the new automation revolution is gonna radically change my proposed
I mean,
solutions and what specific problems will have it, but like right now in the current system, even in a social democratic system, the automation wave is gonna really fucking wreck the economy, like really bad.
it's going to like it'll only wreck the economy if the state fails to properly deal with it.
Which it usually does.
Yeah, but I mean, if they actually fix the UBI and they tax the corporations properly, then that would help a lot.
Like it's so funny talking. It's so like amazing talking to someone from like a country like Norway. When I live in a country
Yeah,
like America, and I'm thinking like the idea of the government actually cut taxing companies fairly is just such a
yeah.
pipe dream at this point. It's insane because like the problem in America isn't specifically that companies aren't taxed a lot. It's that well, I mean, because of
They
tax
avoid
cuts,
it.
a lot of yeah, it's
Yeah,
that they
yeah.
avoid it really well.
They do
Well,
that
a
here
lot
too
of
to some extent.
Trump's tax cuts just got around it and are just like instead of avoiding it, you just don't have to pay, which is fucking
Yeah,
stupid if you want to bring jobs back because
yeah.
every time jobs have been at like unemployment has been as the lowest is when the tax rates have been high. Like it doesn't make sense.
And I mean, one of the biggest employers is the state normally.
Oh yeah,
So
I mean that's the whole
yeah, and the
guaranteed
state
jobs thing Bernie talks about.
wants to be able to operate and it needs money. I mean, it's the state that incentivizes private companies to build roads and to build trains and whatnot normally.
Um, yeah, for the most part. Well, how it works.
I mean,
Well, that also in America has a
requires a lot
profit
of
motive.
work,
Well, in
right?
America, it also has a profit motive because, like you said, corruption is basically
Sorry,
illegal here. Huh?
I think you cut out after you said in America and then
Oh,
blank.
yeah, in America, it also has a profit motive because, like you said, corruption is basically illegal here. So,
Here,
like,
like the state does like employ private enterprise to build
yeah.
various
Well, it's
things,
that old
right?
joke of like, this state employee, this government employee goes, talks, has to get funds, has to buy has funds to buy a company to get a company to build a road or something, and he goes to one
Yeah,
company and they say, oh, it's $10,000. He goes to another company and they say, oh,
yeah,
it'll be 11,000, and he goes to another and they're like, it'll
yeah,
be 100,000, and he asks, wait, why is yours so much higher than the other two? And he's like, oh, well, it'll take like 10,000 to fix the road, and we can pocket the rest.
yeah, yeah. I get that. I mean, I know that that does happen, definitely.
Yeah. Um,
But I mean, there's also like instances where private sectors does improve something so that they can operate it cheaply and still have a profit.
oh yeah, the private sector
And that,
does. The private sector definitely does.
yeah,
Do good
yeah.
things in
And I
some
mean,
cases.
that incentive to earn money isn't really prevalent in the socialist system. And I mean, you can critique like how
Well,
earning is shouldn't be an incentive because toxic and perversion. But I mean, it's a good way of optimizing the system too. It's a good way of optimizing processes to make them as cheap as possible, but
Is
still
it though?
uphold
Because,
similar standards. I
but
mean,
is
it
it
can
though?
be.
Like, I mean, it can be in some
Can be.
cases, but in many times, like a lot of market systems are very inefficient. Um, you think of David Graeber points this out in his book Bullshit Jobs, how like um, there's so many jobs in the modern economy that really serve no purpose and really do nothing. The example he uses is like he calls, he gets a company to fix a hole in his roof, and the guy never comes, and he calls, and there's a guy whose his entire job is just um, make it is this tell the customer, oh, I'm really really sorry, we'll get a guy to you as soon as possible. And this guy, he's doing his job, he's
Yeah.
doing it really well, but you always think like, why don't they just hire another guy that could be coming to my house right now instead of hiring this guy to apologize to me? There's a lot of waste and inefficiency that happens in the market system. It's not always just gonna be the most, the cheapest,
Yeah.
most
I
efficient
mean, yeah.
method.
No, like obviously, like sometimes it'll try to maximize the profits as much as possible, and part of doing that is, trying to stretch the limits as much as possible,
Yeah.
trying to prevent doing certain things. I mean,
Well,
you see that often when
other times it's really just to kind of fill the ego, because a lot of companies are,
I'm, I'm
hmm, yeah, yeah,
I was going to say that like it's more that the state has a certain standard, and that standard is often way higher than private sector. So when the private sector is employed, it'll just cut a lot of corners.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And also like a lot of companies are their prestige is kind of determinant on how many employees they have. So a lot of them will just hire employees to do basically fucking nothing, um, uh, just useless work, and just to be like, oh, our company has this many employees, and so they kind of make themselves less efficient in order to market themselves better.
I mean, in that instance, you got to give it to them. At least they're employing people.
I guess. Well, but those people, he Graeber also points out how, like a lot of these people in these
Yeah, they're
bullshit jobs are also
probably not
miserable.
paid well.
Well, they're
Yeah.
some of them are actually paid very well, but they're also miserable because like they
Mm,
make a lot of money, but they don't feel like they're doing anything that matters because
sure.
there is a fundamental desire in humans to work. I think we could both agree. Like,
I mean, I feel like that's a simplification. I feel like there's a basic desire to be useful.
yes, there's a basic desire.
Uh,
There's a basic desire to know that what you're doing is like important. You have some important in
I
how
feel like
things
it's
are
more
running.
like, I mean, I'd rephrase that and say that it's important to feel like you think you're useful in some way,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
either to yourself or to others. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and the way by which you feel you're useful is by what you do. Like, if I make bird houses or something, I feel useful. So when I sell my stuff to a customer and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna enjoy this very well for you."
Sure.
Yeah. Um,
No one feels useful flipping burgers on McDonald's. Of course, people are miserable
right,
there.
right. No one feels useful like just sitting in an office and just pushing a
I
button every
mean,
day or something.
yeah, but I mean, some jobs just genuinely make you feel miserable, even though they're useful.
I,
Like you can
well,
have like jobs that are necessary, but they just feel so awful. I mean, this isn't a good example of something being very useful, but I mean, it is useful regardless. I mean, flipping burgers again at McDonald's. I mean, kind of need someone to flip those burgers, even though it's not a fun, enticing job that
yeah.
makes you feel appreciated or you feel like you're contributing to society. But
Well,
it's still important in the context of the company.
well, I would disagree that there are some things like even some things that we might believe would make us miserable, um, wouldn't fulfill people. Like Chomsky pointed this out. He talks about the average Trump voter. Like, okay, well, who's the average Trump voter? It's a white dude who wants Trump to bring back the coal mines because he wants to work in them. And so you
Sure.
think about it, and it's like this guy would rather work in a coal mine, which we both agree is probably not the nicest setting to work in. But he'd rather work
Sure.
there than take a handout from the government. So it seems like people, you know, doing something, uh, doing labor, working, really gives them a strong sense of fulfillment. Um,
Sure, but I mean, again, I would attribute that to the kind of job. Like, yeah, some people like you can find oddballs that will take these really peculiar jobs that most people never would do, like uh people whose job it is to like open up sewages when they're plugged, right?
mm.
People who, I mean, I can't really think of any good examples,
Oh man, it's hard to.
but
Well, it is hard to think of like really things people do that are
oddball jobs.
useless because there's so much things
Yeah,
you can do. In fact, I think the most useless work is probably white collar work. Um, just working in an office and taking calls all day. It's like the most soul degrading thing ever.
I mean, it's just like the pinnacle of service jobs that kind of went horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like people really like, oh, I can just call these people, how wonderful. Like the reason why call jobs, like calling people is so, big is because there was a big market for it. People really enjoy that. People really enjoy like having the availability of just calling someone for help or just venting their frustration to them, sadly.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah,
but but then you think of like uh, but again, then it goes back to like you called the customer support and they're doing a very good job telling you like, oh, we're sorry, we're trying to help you as much as possible, but you know, instead of hiring that one guy, why don't you just spend that money into
yeah.
making it so the thing doesn't break in
But
the first place?
yeah, but I mean like the usability of like call worker can depend. I mean, some things definitely do need such availability though.
Mm.
Like if you actually have like if it's important to know certain questions, you kind of need to have a place you can get that information from.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And
no,
even though
there's
and even though like most of the information might be available online, it's not always easy to find.
yeah, yeah,
I mean,
there's there's a lot of nuance to it, obviously.
yeah, yeah.
But there are still a lot of like there's so much waste that goes into a modern economy that can just that the private ownership model kind of not only there's so much waste that the private ownership model really like it kind of encourages in many cases. Now I'm not saying that maybe in a market socialist economy that would also be the case, but I think that would a lot of that would be mitigated in under a more socialistic public ownership system. Um,
I mean, I think that would really depend on the job. I mean, I don't think call workers would just, disappear. They wouldn't
yeah, yeah, it
just be,
depends on the call worker.
kinda. But at the same time, like, spreading of information is just so important, especially when it's necessary for
Yeah,
whatever the fuck you're
yeah,
doing.
yeah. The dissemination of information across like
Yeah.
transparent lines is a huge deal. That I, it's actually something I'm really interested in. I'm definitely making a video on it in the future. Hmm. All right. Yeah. So you have any closing statements and or any last thing you want to say?
Um, Consumerism is appealing. People are wasting. Bye.
It's neat. Um,
Yes.
uh, Reject modernity, embrace
Uh,
tradition,
it,
and fuck a bunch
yeah.
of men like the ancient Greeks did. That's my closing statement. Uh,
Nice.
yeah. All right. Thanks, Cal. This was really
You,
fun. I'm gonna
yeah, no
stop
problem.
recording now.
Que nos espere el dolor y la muerte, contra el enemigo nos manda el deber, el bien más preciado es